"I can fix the flooded subway in 3 hours," said the janitor. The city engineer laughed in disbelief. "A mop pusher fix the metro system?" When a janitor faces the flooded subway tunnel and says he can fix it in 3 hours, the city's silence reveals that nobody imagines what comes next. Gregory Thornton, the Metropolitan Transit Authority chief engineer, everyone called Big Greg, stood in the emergency command center, slamming his fist on the desk so hard his coffee spilled across blueprints and emergency protocols. "What do you mean the pumps won't arrive until Monday? This is Friday afternoon. We have 300,000 commuters depending on the Red Line. This flood is costing us $2 million per day in lost revenue and emergency rerouting." The command center screen showed the devastation. The main Red Line tunnel at 42nd Street Station completely flooded, water reaching 8 feet deep, covering the tracks, the platforms, everything. A burst main water pipe, combined with a spring rainstorm, had created a perfect catastrophe. The most optimistic estimate said 5 days to pump out the water, another week to assess damage, 2 weeks minimum before trains could run again. In this chaos of bureaucracy and desperation, Marcus Webb pushed his janitorial cart through the command center's side entrance, badge dangling from his neck, mop and bucket rattling with each step. Marcus was 53, but looked 70 from decades of night shifts, cleaning subway platforms while the city slept, breathing diesel fumes and chemical cleaners. His grey coveralls were stained with 1,000 colors of grime, his work boots were cracked and worn, and his hands were calloused from wringing mops for 30 years. But his eyes had a different gleam when they landed on the flooded tunnel footage on the screens, the gleam of someone recognizing a problem he knew how to solve. He stopped his cart and approached the emergency cluster of engineers and managers arguing around the central desk. "Excuse me, Mr. Thornton," Marcus said, removing his transit authority cap in old courtesy. "I can drain that tunnel. 3 hours, just me and the old gravity drainage system. No pumps needed." The silence that followed lasted only 2 seconds, but felt like eternity. Then Big Greg turned, saw the janitor in stained coveralls with a mop bucket, and let out a laugh so cruel it made the junior engineers stop their frantic phone calls to watch the show. "Get back to your toilets, Webb. This is engineering work, not custodial fantasies. Security, escort this man back to his station before I write him up for insubordination." The security guards approached, hands on their radios. Office staff gathering for the crisis meeting paused in doorways to watch the spectacle. Marcus didn't move, didn't lower his eyes, just held his cap with both hands and kept looking at the flooded tunnel footage, as if it was speaking to him in a language only they understood. That's when the woman approached. She'd been there since the beginning of the emergency, watching from the back of the room with a tablet and a neutral expression. She wore a simple navy suit, practical flats, minimal makeup, no obvious authority markers. She looked like just another city liaison or budget analyst, but there was something about how she moved, a quiet confidence that didn't need titles. "Let the man speak, Gregory," she said with a calm but firm voice that cut through the mockery. Big Greg turned, annoyed. "And you are?" "Sarah Kim, State Oversight Commission. I'm here observing your emergency response protocols," she said smoothly, showing credentials. "I suggest you hear what this employee has to say." Marcus turned to her, grateful for the respect. "This tunnel doesn't need modern electric pumps, ma'am. It needs someone who remembers the original 1904 drainage system. There's a gravity-fed emergency drain that connects to the old aqueduct system 3 levels down. The entrance is behind the maintenance panel at the north end of the platform. Every modern engineer forgets it exists because it's not in the digital blueprints, only in the original hand-drawn plans stored in archives. I can open that drain, and gravity will empty the tunnel in 3 hours naturally." The silence returned, but different now. It was the silence of disbelief. Big Greg took 2 steps forward, face red with condescension. 3 hours? You've been breathing too much bleach, Webb. Professional engineers said 5 days minimum with industrial pumps. You probably can't even read a blueprint. Get back to work before I have you suspended. But Marcus didn't look at Big Greg. He looked only at Sarah, straight in her eyes, with serenity that disarmed suspicion. I only need basic tools. A crowbar, a hydraulic jack, and access to the flooded platform. I owe nobody anything. I just want to help. This city deserves its subway running. Those last words floated in the tense command center air. Sarah Kim, who wasn't actually state oversight, but Margaret Chen, the newly appointed MTA board chairwoman conducting an anonymous evaluation of leadership, felt something stir in her chest. Not pity, recognition. She saw in that old janitor something missing in all the credentialed engineers, all the expensive consultants, all the emergency contractors. Pure truth without polish. Give him access, Sarah said, and her voice admitted no discussion. Big Greg opened his mouth to protest, but the look he received from this supposed analyst made him swallow his words. But if he causes more damage, you're personally liable, Greg grumbled, turning to his phone to complain to his union rep. Marcus grabbed his cart and headed for the service elevator that led down to the flooded platform. Sarah followed, carrying a flashlight and first aid kit. They descended 3 levels in silence, the sound of rushing water growing louder with each floor. When the elevator doors opened, the devastation was total. Murky brown water filled the tunnel, trash and debris floating on the surface, emergency lights casting eerie reflections. The platform was half submerged, water lapping at the tile walls. Marcus waded into the water without hesitation, not caring that it soaked through his boots and coveralls. Sarah stayed on the dry section, watching. How did you learn about this drainage system, Marcus? Marcus paused, waist deep in filthy water, looking back at her. I started here in 1991, ma'am. My first supervisor was old Mr. Chen. He'd worked these tunnels since 1952. He showed me all the old systems, all the original engineering before computers took over. Said someday we'd need this knowledge when the fancy technology failed. He died 10 years ago, but I never forgot what he taught me. Sarah felt her eyes sting. Her grandfather, old Charlie Chen, the legendary tunnel worker who'd literally built parts of this subway with his own hands. And here was someone who'd learned from him, who'd honored his knowledge. And why are you doing this for free, Marcus? You could demand overtime, hazard pay. Marcus stopped, turned to face her fully, water dripping from his uniform. Ma'am, when you can help, you help. This city gave me a job when nobody else would hire a high school dropout. These tunnels fed my family for 30 years. If I don't use what I know to serve back, what's the point? Money goes, titles fade, but what we do to help others, that stays. That's what Mr. Chen taught me. Sarah felt an unexpected lump in her throat. She stood before something rare, true dedication without expectation. In that instant, she made a decision that would change 2 lives forever. The afternoon sun beat down on the street above. Marcus was working, prying open the rusted maintenance panel, when the sound of expensive vehicles echoed in the tunnel. A convoy of white vans pulled into the service bay above, visible through the platform's skylights. Out stepped a man in his 30s, hard hat gleaming, high-vis vest perfectly pressed, carrying an iPad and surrounded by a crew of technicians. "Gregory!" he shouted, his voice echoing down. "It's me, Derek Yang from Aquatech Emergency Solutions. Heard about your crisis and mobilized from Boston with our rapid deployment pumping system." Big Greg practically ran up from the command center like salvation had arrived. Derek adjusted his hard hat and smiled with the confidence of someone who'd never failed because they only took lucrative government contracts. "We specialize in metropolitan flood recovery. Brought our patented vacuum extraction system, can remove water at 5,000 gallons per minute. We can have our full crew deployed by morning and complete drainage in 4 days for only $850,000 emergency rate. He finally noticed Marcus, who'd paused his work in the flooded tunnel below, looking up at the commotion. And who's that guy?" Big Greg let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, that's just our janitor claiming he can do it in 3 hours with some ancient drain nobody's ever heard of. Delusions. But this oversight woman insisted we let him try." Derek looked down at Marcus with a mixture of pity and professional superiority. "Sir, I appreciate your initiative, but emergency flood recovery requires certified specialists, industrial equipment, EPA compliance. This isn't mopping a bathroom spill." He gave a condescending wave and was about to deploy his team when Sarah stepped forward and blocked access to the service elevator. "Derek Yang, is it?" Sarah asked, voice calm but with steel underneath. "Yes, ma'am. Owner of Aquatech Emergency Solutions, certified by FEMA, contracts with 12 major cities." "I'm the state oversight observer," Sarah replied. "And I think it would be professional to wait and observe what this employee is attempting before deploying $850,000 in taxpayer resources." Derek blinked, confused. "With all due respect, ma'am, this employee doesn't even have proper equipment. Look at him, using a crowbar and standing in contaminated water. This is a critical infrastructure emergency, not a DIY project." Before anyone could respond, Derek was already deploying his team, setting up industrial pumps on the platform above, running thick hoses down toward the water, consulting digital flow charts on tablets. His crew worked with corporate efficiency, and news cameras that had arrived to cover the crisis filmed the impressive display of technology. Marcus just took a deep breath, dove under the water, and kept working on the rusted panel below the waterline. No anger on his face when he surfaced for air, just ancient sadness from seeing the same story repeat. Money confusing expense with solutions, new technology dismissing old wisdom. Sarah stayed on the platform edge, shining her flashlight down for Marcus. "Aren't you going to defend your plan?" Marcus shook his head, water streaming from his hair. "Don't need to, ma'am. The tunnel will speak for me. Always does." For 45 minutes, Derek worked with maximum visibility. His team positioned pumps, tested flow rates, ran calculations on screens. News cameras captured every moment. Big Greg stood beside Derek like a proud sponsor, nodding approval whenever Derek said something that sounded expensive and impressive. "See here, Gregory. Our flow analysis shows optimal extraction positioning. We'll start pumping at dawn, maintain continuous operation, complete drainage by Tuesday. This is state-of-the-art emergency response." He connected more equipment, took more measurements. Numbers scrolled across tablets like stock prices. "System calibrated," Derek announced to the cameras. "Pumping will commence at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Estimated cost, $850,000. Guaranteed completion, 96 hours. He smiled at the cameras, then looked down at Marcus, still working in the filthy water. "See, sir? That's professional emergency response. But nice try." Sarah said nothing, just watched Marcus. 96 hours, Marcus murmured, surfacing for air. 96 hours while 300,000 people suffer. Sarah felt something shift. The janitor understood urban responsibility better than the experts. "You still think you can do it in 3 hours?" Marcus nodded, water dripping from his face. "I'm certain, ma'am. But nobody here wants to believe the mop pusher." That's when it happened. Derek, wanting to demonstrate even more expertise, decided to test his pumps immediately. "We'll run a brief extraction test to show the media our capability." He activated the lead pump, but what happened next was catastrophic. The pump roared to life, began sucking water, and immediately clogged. The backup pump activated, hit the same debris field, and also clogged. The third pump tried, made a horrible grinding noise, and shut down with alarms blaring. Derek's confident smile vanished. "This doesn't make sense," he said, loud enough for cameras to catch. "Our systems are rated for construction debris, unless—" He pulled up readings on his tablet, and his face went pale. "The water contamination levels are off the charts. This isn't just floodwater. It's mixed with raw sewage from the burst main. Our equipment can't process this concentration. We'd need specialized hazmat pumps. Different contract, different timeline. We're talking 12 days minimum and $2.3 million. Big Greg's face went white. 12 days? 2 million? That's impossible. The city will crucify us. Derek shook his head, looking genuinely troubled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton, but our technology has limits. This is beyond our contract scope. Aquatech cannot proceed. I'm very sorry." He packed his equipment quickly, crew following suit. Within minutes, the white vans were pulling away, leaving Big Greg standing in the command center, looking like a man watching his career end. The news cameras captured every moment of the failure. Marcus surfaced from the water, breathing hard, and called up to Sarah. "Ma'am, I found it. The main drainage valve. It's covered in 70 years of rust and sediment, but it's intact. I need 20 more minutes to clear the mechanism." The silence was total. Big Greg stared down at Marcus like seeing him for the first time. Sarah felt her heart racing, and that's when she spoke, her voice carrying through the tunnel with undeniable authority. "Marcus, you have complete authorization. Whatever you need, however long it takes, nobody interferes. Understood?" Big Greg opened his mouth to protest, but something in Sarah's tone, something he'd never heard from any analyst, made him close it again. Marcus looked at Sarah with gratitude beyond words, then dove back under the contaminated water. For the next 90 minutes, Marcus worked like a man possessed. He cleared debris from the valve mechanism by hand, removed 70 years of rust with his crowbar, positioned his hydraulic jack to create enough pressure to turn the ancient wheel. His lungs burned from diving in filthy water. His hands bled from cuts. His back screamed from the physical effort. But he didn't stop. And then, with a groan that echoed through the tunnel like a giant awakening, the valve turned. Marcus spun it once, twice, 3 times. And then came the sound, a deep, rushing roar as water began draining through the gravity system his mentor Mr. Chen had shown him decades ago. 8 feet deep water began dropping. 6 feet, 4 feet, 2 feet. The news cameras captured it all. The impossible drain, the water disappearing like magic, the ancient system working perfectly when modern technology had failed. 3 hours and 7 minutes after Marcus had first dove into the water, the tunnel was dry. Not a drop remained. The old gravity drain had done its job perfectly, just as it had been designed to do in 1904. Marcus climbed out of the tunnel, exhausted, covered in filth, bleeding from a dozen small cuts. Big Greg stood speechless. The news cameras swarmed, and Sarah finally revealed herself. She removed her visitor badge and pulled out her real credentials. MTA Board Chairwoman Margaret Chen. "My name isn't Sarah Kim. I'm Margaret Chen, granddaughter of Charlie Chen and your new board chair. I've been conducting anonymous leadership evaluations. Gregory Thornton, you're demoted to junior engineer, effective immediately for gross incompetence and contempt for institutional knowledge." She turned to Marcus. "Marcus Webb, I'm promoting you to Chief of Historic Systems and Infrastructure Knowledge. Salary, $95,000 annually. Your job, teaching the next generation everything Mr. Chen taught you. Will you accept?" Marcus looked at the official badge she extended, at the tunnel he'd saved, at the cameras broadcasting his moment. He fell to his knees, crying. 6 months later, Marcus led a new MTA division, preserving old systems knowledge. He taught young engineers the forgotten wisdom, the analog backups, the human expertise computers couldn't replace. And every day he'd touch the old drainage valve, feeling the solid brass beneath the surface, and whisper, "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Thank you for teaching me that old knowledge still matters."